Well, hey everybody, John Ripplin here with another episode of a series that I thought that, I had totally forgotten that I had done. Wrestling's Most Tasteless, where I talk about angles, matches, whatever, from WWE, Impact, WCW, and I'll throw out WCCW, AWA, pretty much from anything I have access to on the WWE network or anything that is related to wrestling. I am more than happy to talk about it. So if you can think of stuff from other, wrestling companies, ones that I listed, or the ones, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and maybe I'll continue to do more of these. But for now, episode 4 is going to be kind of a one-off, and I could always bring it back down the road. But I'm kind of frustrated with the current WWE product, so I figured why the fuck not talk about some stuff that generally has pissed me off. And this is a lot of older stuff. So yes, this is going to be WWE related. I will have stuff to talk about with WCW and other companies, but again, please leave in the comments if you guys have any ideas or any picks of stuff you would like to, hear me talk about. And if I agree and if I think it's stupid, I will talk about it. But also look in the description of the first 3 episodes in the Rant list, the Rant playlist. It'll be up at the end of the video, and look at the topics and see what I've already talked about. And then from there, leave some comments. But let's get cracking on with first, the Beaver Cleavage character from WWE. Why the fuck did this happen? Oh, right, Russo, the goddamn idiot that he is. He took Headbanger Mosh and turned him in. I believe Thrasher at the time was injured, so they wanted to give, the guy who would later become Chaz, a singles push. They didn't do that very good because they decided to turn him into Beaver Cleavage. The Leave It to Beaver stuff. He was a simpleton. He was supposed to be like a man-child, this kind of stuff, taken care of by his mother that was, throwing her tits out and all this kind of stuff. And I got nothing against the woman that played the mother. I don't know who the hell she is, and I got nothing against her. But it was supposed to be, oh, he's simple or this kind of stuff. He's a 30-year-old guy playing a child, and it was really stupid. And all these vignettes had the mother sticking her tits out, doing this kind of stuff where, oh, she's like, trying to clean him up and everything, and he had this horrible smile on his face because she's trying to clean stuff off of his crotch, off of the crotch of his pants, and he has a stupid smile and this freaking incestuous crap that they had to fucking do. It really speaks to the disturbing nature of a lot of the creative team that they thought that this was a goddamn good idea. It did not get, Headbanger Mosh or, the future Chaz over at all. This did not last very goddamn long. I mean, I do not recall him having a pay-per-view match. Now, maybe he did. Some of that stuff from the 1999 pay-per-views runs together, but this is an example of where I tell people, the Attitude Era wasn't all a bed of fucking roses. Sure, everybody had a goddamn role, but the roles weren't always goddamn good. So, you had the incestuous stuff and all that and everything, and then they had it where the woman suddenly had marks on her, like it was a domestic abuse thing, an abusive relationship. But then it suddenly wasn't. And then the angle was goddamn dropped. Who the fuck did this get over? It didn't get anybody over. People were like, oh, but it's a memorable character. Memorable, but not for the right reasons. Like, honest to fucking God, this is the kind of bullshit that I see where I don't care who fucking booked this. I don't care who fucking came up with this creative. This was a goddamn stupid idea. And it was a stupid idea because what the fuck good did it do? It didn't do any good. I mean, from there, you had him as Chaz, and then the Headbangers reunited very briefly after Thrasher came back from his injury, and then you had, Chaz join D'Lo Brown as Lowdown, and they dressed up like Tiger Ali Singh, who was their manager. Oh dear, that didn't go well. And then from there, I think he was out of the company by 2001, sometime in like mid-2001. I don't know where the fuck else he went after this. This kind of character is a goddamn career killer. And yeah, it was likely Russo that came up with it. I mean, I can't imagine what other idiot would come up with this and think it's a good idea, though Bruce Pritchard never came up with the best ideas either, or at least not a lot of them. This was just such a bad idea on all levels. It didn't matter who came up with this. This was not going to get over. And the incest and domestic violence shit, my God, my fucking God, I felt so bad for Chaz. Felt so bad for him. I felt bad for the woman that was playing the mother, even though I don't know who the fuck she is, because this was just, it was nothing. It was like the Terry Rose miscarriage angle, and I talked about that in the first, or I think it might have been the second episode. But that was bullshit. That was just complete fucking bullshit. I mean, what in the world was the point of that? Nothing. There was no goddamn reason for this Beaver Cleavage character to exist. It wasted time, wasted resources, and just killed whatever credibility he had. Not that he had that much credibility anyway, mainly just as a tag team guy. It was pretty damn stupid. Now let's move on because I'm really fired up now. Let's talk about Stephanie's comments on Smackdown. The Smackdown right after 9/11 happened. Now, I want to say this. I don't know if Stephanie was just being tone deaf, if she's just being stupid or whatever. The bottom line is, without getting into the full details of the comments, because it's better if you actually hear this stuff from her mouth, she compared the actions, or, the tragedy of 9/11 and the deaths of thousands of people from this horrible freaking tragedy. This horrible, tragic, terroristic attack. She compared those to what happened to her family when Vince was on trial, in the steroid scandal and stuff like that. I want you to process that for a bit. Just process it for a bit. Stephanie McMahon compared a steroid trial that her dad was involved in and that the company was, suffering from and stuff like that, whether Vince was at fault or not. She compared that to the deaths of thousands of people. And to all, slapping every single victim in the face and the people that were doing the relief efforts, all that stuff. She compared that. That was fucking tasteless. Now, whether Stephanie actually meant that or not, or if it was just tone deaf, or she just didn't think this through, that kind of stuff, I don't know how black her heart is or isn't. But I'll tell you this, that turned me off to ever really rooting for her again. Now, everybody deals with tragedy differently. Some people make jokes. I tend to make jokes when it comes to a lot of tragedies. I'm not saying for this one, but everybody does it differently. They dive into other other things that they do. They, focus on music or movies or wrestling. And in the case, sometimes we do anything to escape reality. And a lot of people did that, even though they were horribly horrified, as the world was, when it came to, what happened in 9/11. Because it affected the world, not just America. And Stephanie comparing that to the steroid trial, she might as well have just slapped everybody in the face and died. And that's a reason why I really have very, very little respect for her. So yeah, maybe the comments were just taken out of context. Maybe I read too much into them. But that was a really, really big slap in the face to a horrible, horrible tragedy. One of the biggest tragedies in at least modern history. It was goddamn terrible. And Stephanie deserved to be completely verbally eviscerated for that. And I actually, honest to God, hope she was. I don't know who the fuck thought it was a good idea to put that pre-recorded comment on there. Because everybody else seemed to be making some pretty good, pretty good comments, pro-USA comments, pro-peace, all this kind of stuff, whatever. People banding together and stuff like that. And Stephanie doing that just completely, cut through that like a knife. And it was one of the most tasteless things I've ever seen. And I know something about making some tasteless jokes. But even I have a line. Like this stuff, I will not even touch. And Stephanie minimizing it to make it about how her family suffered so goddamn much. Yeah, fuck you, Steph. Seriously, that's fucking goddamn bullshit. Now, let's get on to something lighter. Okay, maybe not so much lighter because this deals with tragedy also. Remember how Brian Pillman died? The morning of the Bad Blood pay-per-view, In Your House, Bad Blood. I believe he was supposed to face Goldust? I think he was supposed to face Goldust. But he was found dead in his hotel room that morning. So, how would WWE deal with this tragedy? Obviously, they had to report on the pay-per-view that Brian Pillman had been found, passed away in his hotel room. Okay, they deal with that. Maybe they have a tribute on Raw. Do they fucking ever? Because they interview Brian Pillman's widow, and the stories I've heard about her in subsequent years have soured me on her as far as what she's apparently done with the money that she got from the company, not helping her children. But putting that to the side, Vince McMahon brought Brian Pillman's widow, I don't even remember her name, honestly. I haven't watched the Brian Pillman documentary for a while. 24 hours, roughly. Maybe 36 hours, depending on when she found out about it. barely a day after she was found out that her husband died. Vince McMahon is interviewing this woman on a national television program and asking her questions like, well, what happens now? How are you going to support your family? How are you going to do this? Fucking hell, Vince. Good grief. Now, yes, I'm sure she agreed to this kind of thing. Yes, I want to tell my husband's story or put this kind of stuff out, but good grief. I mean, if that isn't fucking tasteless, I don't know what the fuck is. Because the kids were going to probably watch that at some point. The kids might, watch it now. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Pillman and her kids do. Well, except for Flying Brian Jr. I mean, I can only imagine what he might think of it looking back on it. But looking at the totality of that, Brian Pillman being found passed away Sunday morning, afternoon, depending on when they actually found out, and then interviewing the now widow a day later, interviewing her and saying, the company is here for you to support you in this kind of stuff, and you can say your piece. Okay, it's the questions that Vince asked that was just downright ridiculous. That is another reason why the Attitude Era isn't exactly seen in the best light by me, because there's some shit that should have not happened. Now, I'm not saying there isn't shit that hasn't happened in modern years, and even this year, and bullshit that hasn't happened in WWE and other companies. This is one of the most tasteless things, not the most tasteless thing. But it was goddamn stupid, and tasteless, and crass, and horrible. Again, we all deal with tragedy differently. She may have signed off on this to do this kind of stuff, and okay, cool, that's great. I do not get the reasoning behind doing this, though, at least in Vince's eyes. Yes, drawing more eyeballs and everything and all this stuff, but one, the way he died obviously of the way he died. You can read about that, because I'm not going to judge Pillman on that. But just the way he dealt with it, Vince interviewing the widow, I just couldn't believe it. I remember watching it and thinking, and mind you, WCW was doing a bunch of bullshit by this point too. There were no lines that they wouldn't goddamn cross. I mean, think about what they did with Hawk. Having Hawk, fall off the Titantron. Oh boy. That was also something that was something I also may have talked about. I may have talked about it in other videos, but this was so bad. This was so goddamn bad, and I just didn't understand why they needed to do it, except for shock value. It was just such a slap in the face, and dragging that personal stuff out in the open. I just hate it. But let's get on to something lighter. WWE having HLA, Hot Lesbian Action. They had women that were fucking called just the lesbians. That's all it was. Now, whatever your opinion is when it comes to, the LGBTQ community, or as AJ Styles calls the gay community, the bottom line is people still deserve respect regardless of what their sexuality is. Now, okay, back 21-year-old me found this sort of humorous, because I'm sure that these women probably signed off on it, and they were beat up by Rosie and Jamal, who did take care of them. You could tell they took care of them, so I'm not going to fault that. And yes, Eric Bischoff was being sleazy-y on here, and it was just, his sleazy-y character, and it was just a way to do this kind of, just to, pop ratings on Raw and make the brands more distinct. But realistically, I didn't understand it, because it didn't improve ratings. It didn't do anything good. It's like you just brought women out there to kiss and then get beat up. I mean, they weren't even actual athletes. They were just women that were out there in skimpy outfits, which granted pretty much summed up most of WWE's, creative's opinion towards women outside of Trish, Lita, Molly, and Victoria. Even though Victoria had not, I don't think, had made her return to TV at the time this happened, because I think this happened at Unforgiven 2002. I think, if I remember right. Which was a bit weird. Yeah, there was actually not that bad of a pay-per-view. But that's the whole HLA thing. Cool. Okay, women kissing. You realize that there is the internet for that. Even back then, there was the internet for that. I don't know. I just didn't see the reason for it. I mean, okay, let me rephrase it. I saw the reasoning for it. The reasoning was just stupid. Why would we want to see that on wrestling? I guess they did an ECW with Beulah and Kimona. I think it was them. I don't remember too much about ECW, But they did that, and okay, but that wasn't anything that lasted really long. And then Dreamer was involved. I'll take both. I'm hardcore. But whatever. The HLA thing was just stupid. But speaking of something that was stupid, something that it's a guilty pleasure of mine because I actually enjoy the segment. I'm going to finish off with this segment here. Was the Billy and Chuck wedding. The reason that I found it tasteless was because it kind of slapped, in the face all the people that, actual gay people that actually, born gay that had, that embraced who they are and stuff like that and wanted to be with somebody of the same sex, which there's nothing wrong with that. And sorry, if you're watching this channel and you have an issue with the LGBTQ community or people living their life that way because it's who they are, you can fuck right off of this channel because I have no room for that kind of intolerance. Now, I personally found this segment entertaining, though what was tasteless about it was the fact that they were pretending to be gay people, Billy and Chuck were, and then they had to show that the whole thing was a ruse. It was like one step forward, two steps back. Now, admittedly, I found the whole thing entertaining. They went through the whole deal with, Rico having his video package. Stephanie was there. Bischoff was, revealed himself to be the pastor or the preacher. And that was actually pretty cool. And then Rosie and Jamal attacked, and they actually ended up beating up Stephanie, which, equality. But then again, after the thing I talked about with Stephanie's comments, maybe she kind of fucking deserved, to take a little bump. Now, they protected her, obviously, because you don't want to beat up the boss's daughter for real. But what I found tasteless about it was just the fact that it wasn't a very good representation of, gay rights and stuff like that. And even back then, you would have thought that people would have been a little more accepting, but they weren't. Bischoff revealing himself as the pastor was pretty goddamn cool, but at the same time, the whole thing, you just felt scuzzy about it. It felt kind of, ridiculous. It did, and the problem is the payoff was absolutely terrible after this, because I think he had Billy and Chuck versus 3-Minute Warning, and that was the last you saw them as a team. And they were actually gaining some steam as a team. Had been tag champions till about, I want to say July of that year. I think they were the ones that lost to Edge and Hulk Hogan on that July 4th SmackDown. But the whole point is, yes, I like the segment for finding it humorous, and it's still one of my guilty pleasure segments, but it was tasteless for the reasons that I mentioned. And, well, let's finish off with a couple more here, because I'm a little bit fired up here. Let's talk about back in 2001, where Vince made Trish bark like a dog. That's Vince's opinion of women even now. I know that Vince McMahon is playing a character on TV, I think. I'm not exactly sure anymore. But oh boy, was this goddamn bad. This was really goddamn bad. Now, Trish at this point was not much of a wrestler. She was training and she was getting better. But this showed exactly why women had to fight so goddamn hard to be respected in mainstream wrestling. And why for a number of years, even with the great talent that WWE had, Impact was actually ahead of them for a bit when it came to women's wrestling. Because they let the women go out there and be athletes, even if some of them were really, really good looking. Whether they were or weren't, they were allowed to go out there and be actual athletes. And yes, that came 6-something years after this. But watching Trish, now Trish did get the payoff of slapping Vince, hopefully slapping some sense into him, but clearly not, given how the current WWE is going. But this just is making a woman bark like a dog and be subservient to a guy. And look, I'm all about equality. I'm all about people being involved in stuff and having fun and being entertaining. But my God, my fucking God, it's just so bad. And I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking on this stuff, but it was just so stupid. It was just such a slap in the face of Trish. And the few women that were actually trying to get better in the ring, and I'm sure there were more than just a few women that were trying to get better, but they weren't treating women's wrestling seriously then. And you could argue even with Trish, Lita, Molly, Holly, Victoria, and a few others, they still weren't treating women's wrestling all that seriously, except occasionally. But then we're going to finish up with Jerry Lawler mocking Jake the Snake Roberts' alcoholism back in '96. Now, look, Jake made a lot of choices in his life that he has to live with. Now he is healthier. He's made some other choices, like not paying certain people and donating to certain, you know, don't and giving money to people that he has borrowed, like Jerry Gray. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the great Brian Last does, and that's not very cool, especially to a guy that has cancer. But looking back on this, yes, Jake Roberts had plenty of issues and everything, then that built to all this stuff. But what bothered me was the fact that Jake may have been trying to get better at this point. Now, obviously, he didn't, and it took a number of years in DDP yoga to get him back, and a healthier lifestyle. Whether he slipped off the wagon or not, at least he's better, I think. But this, I just didn't like, because, like, I got nothing against trying to be more realistic and using some realism in wrestling. What bothered me was the fact that WWE did this, and Jerry Lawler, who is no goddamn saint himself, especially with his opinions on women and the fact that he dates very young women, and doesn't seem to really be necessarily the best guy when it comes to race relations either, and is certainly somebody that has a lot of skeletons in his closet, and probably other things in his closet that we're not going to talk about, is making fun of a guy for trying to get better. Now, look, there were some funny jokes in there. Even if you laugh through gritted teeth. But this was always something that bothered me, because Jerry Lawler, picking on people, this kind of stuff. I always found Jerry Lawler overrated, and I'm always going to say that. I was never a Memphis wrestling fan. That's not knocking Memphis wrestling. I never got it. I never understood it. I know that there are plenty of people that like it, and that's cool. But Jerry was a minimal star in WWE. I mean, he was mostly a wrestler, a commentator/wrestler. But I never found any of his matches all that interesting. In WWE, once again. I mean, his feud with Brett was fine, but this feud with Jake Roberts just left a bad taste in my mouth. And then again, Jerry Lawler leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth these days. Mainly because he's a crotchety old bastard that tends to say a lot of stupid shit. Much like Billy Graham. Billy Graham, by the way, is a goddamn idiot. I'm going to finish up with this little rant. Billy Graham's a goddamn idiot. And the fact that he thinks that Kofi Kingston, at 145 pounds, which he's not, he's probably closer to 200, Billy, but, you haven't been able to tell what, kind of mass anybody has, because you lost a lot of your mass. Well, it went from your arms to your fucking gut, because you drugged yourself up like crazy, roided yourself up, because all you were was a promo. You were never anything goddamn worth, you were never worth any goddamn thing except how you looked and how you talked. Because you couldn't fucking work. Vince McMahon Sr. was right to take the title off of you and send you into a downward spiral, because it was your fault that you got hooked on the roids, because the roids were the only reason that you were fucking over. Ever. Nobody would have had anything to do with you if you hadn't done any goddamn roids. Because you're a goddamn idiot and a goddamn loser, and you're a goddamn racist old bastard. And you know what, Billy? Hate to say it, but the reason people pay attention to you now is because you say this shit for attention. So here's me giving you this attention. Take your religious beliefs, your all high and mighty thing and everything, and claiming to be a Christian, and shove it up your ass. And the fact that you got a second chance at life with a girl that had, that was, I believe, comatose and, was an organ donor. You got a liver from somebody who got a second chance at life, and this is what you're fucking doing. Yeah. Fuck the hell out of Billy Graham, and guess what? Nobody's going to miss him when he's gone, and I don't care if people want to get upset about that. I'm not wishing death on the guy, but this guy is so goddamn bitter that 50-year-old coffee isn't nearly as bitter as him. He's just mad because nobody's going to remember him besides his promos and the roided up physique that he had. Sure, he drew money. Great. He drew money because people wanted to see him get beat up. Now, that's a classic heel maneuver. But now he has to say this stuff to stay relevant. So here's me giving him, a chance to stay relevant. Just from a wrestling fan's perspective. Somebody that was not alive for most of his, run. Like, by the time it got around to 85, 86, he was pretty much out of full-time competition. I remember having sympathy for Billy Graham back in 2004, when he did his Hall of Fame speech and stuff like that, because he got a second chance at life. And I'm thinking, okay, second chance at life. Nope. He slapped that girl in the face that died. And I hope she's looking down disapproving. I don't even know her name, and that doesn't really matter, because honestly, she passed away, and I hope she's looking down disapprovingly at him. And Billy, you sure as fuck ain't going up to heaven, no matter whether you're saved or not. You're going to go right down there, and you're going to burn in hell for being the racist, horrible, human, horrible human being that you are, the soulless bastard that you are, and nobody's going to miss you when you're gone. So that's going to be the end of that rant. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what I said? Again, leave in the comments which things you would like me to talk about. Like, share, subscribe. Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. Fuck the hell out of Superstar Billy Graham, you crotchety old bastard, you dumb son of a bitch. I'll see you guys soon.